enlisted or did you enlist?
I enlisted in the Navy for 4 years.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in West Haven, Connecticut.
Do you recall the date that you enlisted?
It was November the 11th, 1950.
Why did you join?
I joined the Navy because, for various reasons, I was born in Troy, New York, and at the age of 17, my parents moved to Connecticut. I moved to Connecticut with no relatives at all. They were all still up in New York, Schenectady, Vermont, and I graduated from West Haven High School with a class of 300 students that I didn't know at all. We came down here in February 1947, and I graduated in June. I left the class of 28 in Green Island, New York, and I was devastated. So I spent 3 years in Connecticut. I worked for the New Haven Register, and I had had enough of Connecticut, so this boyfriend that I met when I was 16 in Troy, New York, wanted to get married. We were 18, and my mother said, no, you're too young. So Bill joined the Air Force, and I said, well, I can do the same thing, so I joined the Navy. And that's why I enlisted in the Navy.
Why did you choose the Navy?
I don't know, I just like the uniform, I just like the Navy. To me, I couldn't even tell you specifically why. It was just, and my father never served because during World War II he had 4 children to support and he wasn't able to be drafted. So out of my mother and father had 4 children. I was the oldest. Went in the Navy. My brother next to me went in the National Guard, and then my other 2 brothers were too young, and so I was sort of like the leader of the pack there.
Do you recall your first days in service?
First day? Not really, but I do remember when we had to send our clothes home, and I went, oh my God, all I have is Navy clothes. And it was just a whole new way of living. You know, you're assigned a bunk, you have a foot locker, everything has to be immaculate. Before we could go to breakfast, we had to wash and scrub, wax the floor, clean the latrine, march to the mess hall, march back, march to class. We marched everywhere together. And it was a whole new, that you were a number. And it was 3 months. It was 3 months at Great Lakes Naval Training Center.
So you went right from West Haven to Great Lakes Naval Training?
Right. We drove to New York City, where we left on a train. And it's funny because the train, it was an overnight ride, and where do we stop? In Troy, New York. I went, oh my God, this is where I was born, and the train stopped at Troy, New York, then went on to Chicago.
Did you get off?
Oh no, 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 I think it must have been, it could have been in the middle of the night, or it could have been I just heard someone say, you know, the conductor, we're in Troy, New York, and my heart kind of just, you know, did a little flutter there, because this was my life. That's where my roots were. And even to this day, I wonder if I had stayed in Troy, you know, what would it have been like? It would not have been as exciting as what happened to me after I left, you know, New York. So.
Now, in your 3 months at Great Lakes Naval Training, what did you do? Was it, what kinds of things did they train you to do?
Actually, I don't even remember. I remember going to classes. We had gym, we had drills outside. I can't even tell you what I learned. What I used when I got out of the service were the skills I learned in high school.
No.
My secretarial skills. I was not trained to be on a ship or submarine or an airplane. It was secretarial. And
Do you remember any of your instructors from basic training?
not one.
Do you remember any of the fellow waves?
I do remember one. She was from the South, and she would get up in the morning and sing the Lovesick Blues. I'll never forget. See, growing up in New York State, I was very isolated in Green Island with a population of 5,000 Irishmen. The first time I even talked to a black person, I was 21 years old. I was very isolated as a child, so to go in the service was a rude awakening to, what did I say, life, how other people live. The Southerners were a novelty to me, and it was exciting, to meet all kinds of people in one company. When you grew up only knowing a few people, all with Irish names.
How did you live? What were the living conditions like on base? Was it one big dorm? Did you have your own rooms? Did you bunk with a bunkmate?
We had cubicles. There were 2 bunk beds in each cubicle, and there was a hallway down the center, so everything was open. At the end of your bunk was your footlocker, and then there was the hallway, and then on the other side of the hallway was your locker. And every morning you had to make sure your bed was made, and they had inspections constantly. Constant inspections. You know, you throw that dime on the bedspread to make sure it bounced back. They went through your closet to make sure everything was where it's supposed to be. And I have to say one thing. After I got married and had children, I said to my husband, I could get up in the middle of the night blindfolded and find everything because I was trained to put everything in a certain place, and I knew exactly where everything was.
You got that from your military?
I got that from the military, yeah. Everything had to be in a certain place, and that continued for the rest of my life. That regimented, and I loved it. I loved it.
Now, Joan, we had talked a little off camera about the waves, because you actually were a wave. Can you tell me what that stood for, and what the role of the waves was? Okay, WAVES stands for Women's Auxiliary Volunteer Emergency Service. And they formed the WAVES to replace the man behind the desk. And I was one of them. And I loved it. I love the military. I still do. I'd go back today now if they would take me. After your 3 months of basic training, did you have a graduation? We must have, but for some reason I don't remember. It's been so long. I don't remember the actual graduation. I just remember getting back on a train, and we went to Arlington, Virginia, and that's when we were assigned where we would be. Once you got to Arlington is when you got your assignment? Right. And where were you assigned? I was assigned to the Pentagon, and I always brag about the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And there were only 4 waves. The rest were civil service employees and officers. And I felt very, very honored to be chosen to work there. So you were chosen to serve on the Joint Chiefs of Staff immediately following your basic training? Correct. And is that where you spent your entire time as a wave? So you spent the rest of your service
Right.
working right at the
Right.
Pentagon.
Right. I went into personnel first, and then they put me in the stenographic pool, where if an officer or someone needed a stenographer, they would take one of us out. And then I was assigned to minutes and reports, where we would type the minutes to the meetings of the Joint Chiefs. Everything was coded, so we had no idea what we were typing, but and I have to remark that even back in 1950, we had electric typewriters, which probably no one realized it, but here I am in 1950 with an electric typewriter. And I was a darn good typist. When we would proofread, out of 4 pages, I would maybe make 2 or 3 mistakes. And there was no, like today they have the computers, you can delete a word. There was, you know, there wasn't that. So I loved it. I really did.
Now, did you learn your secretarial skills in your basic training for the ways, or did you learn that while you were in high school?
I learned that in high school.
So you already had that.
I already had that shorthand typing, the commercial part of my education from high school.
What was it like working at the Pentagon?
Exciting, very exciting. I like to brag about the time I saw Omar Bradley coming down the corridor. Of course, JCS was its own entity, and here I am walking down a corridor without a hat, without my cap, and they told me in basic training that you only salute when you have your cap on. And I'm thinking, oh my God, here comes a 5-star general. Well, maybe I'll faint. No, I'll run around, I'll run back so he won't see me. Anyway, I stood there. He approached me and I saluted him. He returned the salute with the biggest grin you would ever see. And I'm thinking he's probably saying, look at that poor little babe, you know. And that, to me, was such an honor to salute Omar Bradley.
And you saluted him even though you didn't have your hat.
Even though I didn't have my cap on, I saluted him. I said, how could you not do that? So, and everything went well, but I was like, for the rest of the, oh my God, I got to salute General Omar Bradley. It was really quite impressive. And then the atrium in the Pentagon, we would have, sit on the grass in the summertime, have hot dogs there. And I want to add something that I thought was kind of cute. I put an ankle bracelet on my ankle with my name on it. I thought I was being real cute. Well, this wave officer came over and she said to me, I don't think that's military regulation. I would like you to take that off. And I was kind of embarrassed, but when I got back to the barracks, I put it back on again. But when I went out again, I did take it off because it was not military regulation, and well, that's how you learn. But that was one of my little things. But no, it was.
What was a typical day like for you at the Pentagon?
I walked from Quarters K, where I was stationed in Arlington, Virginia. It was like a 20-minute walk to the Pentagon. So I would walk to work, walk from, you know, back to the barracks. And you showed your ID for the Joint Chiefs and just report to wherever you were to report, and mostly just do your typing. Go to lunch, go back, and then walk back. And it was a very quiet time.
Did you report to the same office every day? Did you have your regular office there?
Yes, when I was a personnel, I reported personnel. Excuse me. Then, when I was in the stenographic pool, it was there in the minutes and reports.
And how long were you at the Pentagon?
For 2 years. 2 years.
Do you have any memorable experiences from your time at the Pentagon, other than the time you saw Omar Bradley?
No, in the time that we had, no, everything was, and that's where I met my husband at the Joint Chiefs. And we would walk back and forth, and then
we'd go down to Club Jason, that's quarters K, where we would have play bingo and have something to eat there.
Now, what did your husband do? He worked at the Pentagon?
Yeah, he was chief yeoman, and he worked there. And then when we got married, of course, I stayed home. We had our first child at Bethesda Naval Hospital. In fact, 3 of my children were born at Bethesda Naval Hospital. And then we were stationed in Puerto Rico, and I had my 3rd baby at Rodriguez Army Hospital in Puerto Rico. So they were all Navy babies.
Now, were you still a wave when you got married? Did you have to leave service once you were married?
Yes, yes, I did.
So is that why you served your 2 years and got out?
Yes,
got married?
yes, and then I became a civilian. Once I was discharged from the Navy, I became a civilian.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
No, I had the Department of Defense badge that everyone was given.
How did you stay in touch with your family, Joan? Because now,
By mail. By mail. In fact,
because your family was still in
my
Connecticut.
mother and father and 3 brothers were still in West Haven, Connecticut, and my mother, I still remember one time she sent me a letter with a toy spider in it because she knew I hated spiders, and I opened up this letter and out came this rubber spider, and I'm screaming. I spent my birthday, I turned 21 while I was in the Navy. I had my first Thanksgiving there, Christmas, and New Year's at Great Lakes Naval Training Center. Oh yes, and the first time they took us to a dance, that was one, it was comical. They put us all on a bus, all the girls on a bus.
This is when you were still in basic?
I was still in basic training. And we went to, I forget, some place where they had the dance. And the guys had their crew cuts and they had their shirts on that weren't ironed. And we were so thrilled just to be dancing, you know, something different. But no matter where you went as a group. You marched. You were never alone in basic training. But that, I still remember that one night it was, and then we had, at basic training, we were given leave to go into Chicago. So this other girl and I bought bleach, and we bleached one part of her hair, thinking, you know, no one noticed it, but we thought we were real cute, you know, getting away with murder. But it was fun. It was a fun time in my life. It was, you know, getting away from Connecticut. And I liked the service.
You were in during the Korean
conflict.
How close, I know you didn't serve over in Korea,
No.
but how close was the war to you at the Pentagon? Did you hear about it from the people around you at the Pentagon?
I don't ever, no, there was no conversation about it. I was so much into my typing of those reports that took up your day, really. And I loved it. I loved it.
Now, you said that you lived in the K quarters.
Quarters K, that was the name of it. Quarters K.
And was that naval?
Yes.
What was that like?
The waves lived up on the top of the hill. I was in Barracks 13, and the men were at the bottom of the hill. And then in the middle was Club Jason, where everybody drank beer and played bingo and ate.
So in these naval quarters, what was it like? Did you have your own room?
It was again just like in on Great Lakes. We had cubicles with 2 sets of bunk beds, the foot locker, and the closet. And then we had a little vanity table of our own. And everything was open, the laundry room was open, the showers, everything is very much open. And we did...
Were you still subject to inspections?
I don't recall that, but I do know we had to take turns being on duty, like 24 hours a day. Someone had to be at the doorway for 4 hours, and we would alternate. And but I don't remember too much about inspection. I'm sure we had it.
Curfew or any rules? Or could you pretty much come and go?
Pretty much come and go as you please. Yep. Yep.
What was the food like?
Well, I wasn't allowed to eat in the mess hall because I worked in Joint Chiefs of Staff, so I was given per diem, and I had to eat out every day. So I would walk up Columbia Turnpike and go in the diner and have my whatever, you know, my breakfast, and I had lunch in the Pentagon and supper up at the diner.
So 3 meals a day you ate out?
Yes.
For 2 years?
Yes. I wasn't allowed in the mess hall. I did not have a pass. They took it away. But they paid me to eat out.
Was there any pressure or stress?
No. No, none at all.
What did you do for entertainment? Because if you went and you did your typing and your secretarial chores during the day, were you free to do what you wanted?
Whatever you wanted to do at night. You could go to a movie. They did have movies there in the barracks. I remember a few times we went into D.C., I guess to some shows. And and a lot of times I would just go home for weekends. I could take a train and go home and visit my parents.
So you take the train to Connecticut?
Yeah, yep. I did that quite a bit.
Were there entertainers or USO shows?
Not that I recall, no.
Did you get any other time off for leave? Like for a week or two at a time?
I don't remember. I really don't remember whether I'm sure I had a week's vacation, and if I did, most likely I would go home. Yeah.
Did you travel anywhere else while you were in the service?
No, I remember, what was it? 2 other waves and myself, and there was a captain who had his own airplane, and we flew to Louisiana to the Mardi Gras. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. And he even let me, not that I flew the plane, but I was like, for 2 minutes I was like flying the plane.
No, this was his own personal airplane?
This was his own personal airplane, yes. And 2 other waves and myself went down to the Mardi Gras. We stayed at the WAF's barracks, the Air Force barracks. We stayed there, and we had a good time. And one of them took us to a restaurant where his friend's parents owned the restaurant. So it was exciting. Yeah.
Now, this captain was in the Air Force?
I think he was in the Navy. He was a Navy captain.
You met him at the Pentagon?
At the Pentagon. Everybody, even the employees, some of them were civil service. I took a couple of the girls over to the to Quarters K just so they could see and be around, you know, the Navy personnel, and they were entertained by it. Yeah, I was. I enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
No, just the few that I mentioned. Otherwise, it was 2 years wasn't a very long time to have too many things.
Especially when you were working there.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you make friends while you were at the Pentagon with your co-workers or other people in the neighborhood?
Yes, 2 of the girls were civil service employees, and then there was one of the waves that worked in the Joint Chiefs of Staff with me, so we kind of stuck together for lunch, and yeah, we went out to the movies, and
Nothing really spectacular.
And your highest rank was seaman?
Seaman, yep.
What did you think of the officers?
They're very polite. I was very impressed and kind of in awe of where I was, being around the
Now, as a seaman, could you fraternize with the officers, or was that not allowed?
It never even dawned on me. To me, it was a job. I went to work, I did my job, I went home. There wasn't that much conversation between us. After I got married and my husband still stayed in the Pentagon, then we started going out with other couples that were married in the Pentagon. So it was more mixing with other people after I married. But I was very quiet and kind of shy in the beginning. You know, it's just doing what I'm supposed to do. Don't upset anything.
How did you meet your husband? What was he doing at the Pentagon?
He was chief yeoman, so he was
So what's that job?
enlisting, probably similar to what I was doing, just keeping track of the records of the other service people.
So you were doing similar jobs at the
Yeah.
same place, and you would see him every day?
Oh yeah,
at the
every day.
workplace?
Yeah, we walked back and forth, our little 25-minute walk or whatever it was. And yeah, it was really nice. It was a change.
Now, after 2 years, you left the Navy and the Pentagon, and was that because you got married?
Yes.
Which happened first? Did you have to leave before you could get married?
When I got married, I understood that you couldn't stay there. You were supposed to get out when you got married, and that's what
So you got discharged at that time?
yeah.
Now, when you had enlisted, did you have to enlist for a certain period of time?
4 years.
And so how did you handle getting out 2 years early?
I guess I just went to someone and we got married December the 7th, 1952. So then I was discharged on December the 12th. Yeah, I guess
Now, once you were married, you were discharged, you were no longer a wave, but you were the spouse of a military man. Where did you then move to?
Then we moved to Falls Church, Virginia.
But did you still live in naval quarters?
No, this was not naval quarters. This was regular housing. And then we moved to George Mason Apartments. Then we started having our children. And then he was, after 3 years, he was given a transfer to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then we lived with the San Juan Naval Housing Project in Puerto Rico.
How long were you located in Puerto Rico?
In Puerto Rico, 2 years.
Did you stay in touch with any of your former wave friends or the civil servants?
No, I never did. We got in the San Juan Naval Housing Project, we got involved with all the married couples there. And we would go out and to the Chiefs Club, or we'd go into San Juan and do sightseeing. And then at one point, the Chiefs' wives chartered a plane. We went to St. Croix for some kind of a festival and had lunch at the Bluebeard was it a restaurant or whatever it was. And it was exciting. It was a whole different kind of way of seeing people live. And, I liked it.
So now, as a Navy wife, but you had 3 children, then 4 children. Did you work outside the home at all?
I didn't work outside the home until Ray retired in 1959, and my mother was taken ill, and they didn't expect her to live more than 6 months. So we decided, instead of staying in D.C., we moved back to West Haven, Connecticut. And my mother lived 6 weeks, so I got to be with my mother and family before my mother died. And that's the reason we ended up in Connecticut again. The place that I wanted to get away from, I get back to Connecticut again.
And you've been here since then?
And I've been here, well, it's a long story, because when my youngest one went off to kindergarten, I'm vacuuming and I started to cry, like, what is the sense of staying here if the children aren't here? So I went up to the school system and I asked if they had any openings for a secretary. So this other woman and I were in charge of special ed kids for lunch for a year. Then I was a teacher aide in the kindergarten for a half a year, and then I was the school secretary for 12 years. So I was working at the school my children attended. I was home in the summer and all the holidays with my children. So that was a story when they were young. And then Ray and I divorced, and I went back up to Troy, New York. And I met my high school sweetheart that I was supposed to marry when I was 18. And we did get married. So I spent 16 years in Troy, New York with my second husband, my childhood sweetheart.
This is the fellow that your mom wouldn't let you marry?
Right. And then after 16 years, we divorced. And then I decided to come back to Branford because my oldest girl was living here. And I said, I never liked Connecticut, and I'm back in Connecticut. Why? I mean, it's full circle. From 1947 to 2011,
You're still
I'm back in Connecticut, and it's like, I'll probably stay here because I've been here now, what, almost 13 years by myself, and there's no reason to do anything else. I'm too old to go back in the waves. But it is funny, and people say, oh, well, how come you're in Connecticut? Well, that's the way it happened. You know, I say it's a God thing. I was supposed to be, you know, both parents are gone. Brothers have moved away. Children went to college, have moved away. And here I am alone again. It's ironic.
Did you go back to school at all once you got out of the service?
Yes, in fact, I went to Pear College of Art in Handon for interior design. I went there 3 years half-time, and I loved it. Really.
Did you do that on the GI Bill?
No, I didn't. No. I think we used the GI Bill when we bought our home. I don't know if you could have done both or not. But, yeah, I went back to school when, I guess I was 46 at the time. I was going to be this famous interior designer. So I ended up at Ethan Allen Gallery in Milford. And that's when we divorced, and I went, that ended my interior design career in Connecticut, and I went back up to Albany, Troy and Albany.
Joan, did you join any veterans organizations?
I did in Connecticut. I belonged to the veterans group in East Haven. They meet at East Haven Library the third Wednesday of every month.
What group is that?
All I know is the veterans group.
Is it like the VFW or?
No, all I know is it's
Is it all veterans or just Navy?
all veterans. It's interesting to hear stories from people that have lived through the Holocaust, and the last one I heard was a 91-year-old gentleman who was on the Red Cross ship that was near Pearl Harbor at the sinking of the Arizona. And it wasn't like reading in a book. You actually heard firsthand his experience of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And I was 12 at that time. I still remember that day. My brother and I came home from Sunday school, and we heard President Roosevelt on the radio saying that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, and it was a date that would go down in infamy. And it's always stayed with me. It's like, oh my God. And you know, my brother and I were just kids. We're jumping up and down. Oh, yippee, we're in a war. Like, what did we know? You know, you're just little kids. But yeah, and to hear this gentleman talking about living through that was it was an honor to meet him. An honor. And then meeting a woman who lived through the death camp in Poland. She was 88, and her experience of escaping. It's unbelievable, the people that you meet. Unbelievable. And it's an honor to be with these people, to hear their story.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
I know it's necessary to have the military, but I keep saying, why do people have to kill each other when the whole basis of life is to love one another? And here we have to go off and be in wars and kill each other, which is senseless. But it's necessary because we live in the best country on the planet. And
Do you attend any reunions or group gatherings of the ways?
no, I've lost track of all of them. No, I never had an invitation that they were meeting anywhere. No one never initiated it.
Joan, can you comment on your role as a woman in the services? Now, as you know, it's much more accepted to have women, but back when you served, the Ways were one of the first women that we had in service. Did you feel like that you were making history or breaking ground?
I never realized it. I never realized it. I remember telling my friends up in Troy I was enlisting in the service. They tried to discourage me. They said, you're going to lose your identity, all you'll be is a number. And I was determined to do what I wanted to do. And not even knowing the importance of what I was doing. And
How were you treated by the men in the service?
very nice. They were gentlemen. No one was ever out of line. None of the officers were. When I hear some of the stories, I never went through anything horrendous. It was very military, very, I don't know what the word you want to use, regimented, but it was that's how I see the service. Oh, and I do comment on the Marines, though. In the building I live in is a Marine. He lives in the apartment next to me. He gave me a DVD on the silent drill, they call it, and it takes place in D.C. in the evening. I think it still goes on,
Well, these Marines do this drill without a word spoken in the evening. And to me, it's like a dance. At the end of it, you see this military person walking in front of the group, and someone throws a rifle out. He grabs it without moving. Didn't move his head, just grabs this rifle, does all the things that you do with them, marched down and threw it back to the group, and they caught it. It was like unbelievable. And they call it the silent drill. And I'd love to have the DVD on that. It was absolutely...
Have you seen that in person?
No, I just on a DVD. So this Marine said, I said, oh, so you're an ex-Marine? He said, no. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Because the Marines are like part of the Navy. But when I saw that silent drill, I got chills. It was like a dance. Absolutely. You just hear the clicking of the heels and the rifles and not a word. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Joan, how did your service in the military affect your life?
I don't know how to answer that. Only that everything belongs in its own place, and I really can't comment on it. Maybe I wasn't in long enough, but I do know that everything has a place that it has to, a place for everything and everything in its place.
For everything there is a season.
Right, right. Yeah.
Joan, is there anything that you'd like to add that we haven't covered about your experience with the waves?
Well, the only thing I could comment on is, as far as the military and women, my own opinion is that women do not belong on a ship. Women do not belong on a fire out in combat. I don't think a woman is physically capable of what a man is. I mean, that's because probably of my upbringing, my age, that men do men things and women do women things. And some of them do go on ships, and I guess today is today's people, and it's fine. If they're happy with what they do and feel fulfilled in it, then that's what counts. Yeah.
Well, Joan, I'd like to thank you for this interview and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you so much.